The crimson sand beneath Marcus Chen's boots crunched like broken glass as he surveyed the battlefield. Bodies of the Kethvar invasion force lay scattered across the Martian landscape, their chitinous exoskeletons cracked open like discarded shells. Steam rose from the cooling corpses in the thin atmosphere, creating ghostly wisps that danced in the pale sunlight filtering through the dust-filled sky. Marcus wiped the alien blood from his plasma rifle's barrel with practiced efficiency. 3 months of constant warfare had turned the former construction engineer from New Shanghai into something he barely recognized. The soft-spoken man who once built bridges between Earth cities now built barriers between humanity and extinction. Sergeant Chun, the voice crackled through his comm unit, barely audible over the static interference the Kethvar weapons produced. Command needs you at coordinates 77 Alpha immediately. Priority Alpha clearance. Marcus frowned. Priority Alpha meant either very good news or catastrophically bad news, and given humanity's current situation, he doubted it was the former. The Kethvar had appeared 6 months ago through what the scientists called a dimensional rift, bringing with them technology that made Earth's most advanced weapons look like stone tools. Only through desperate guerrilla tactics and an intimate knowledge of their own planet had humanity managed to avoid complete annihilation. The coordinates led him to a collapsed Kethvar command structure, its biometallic walls still pulsing with dying neural networks. The building had been one of their forward command posts, hastily erected after their forces had established a foothold in the Olympia crater. Now it resembled a dying organism, its organic components slowly shutting down as the alien equivalent of blood seeped from ruptured conduits. Captain Sarah Rodriguez emerged from the wreckage, her dark hair streaked with dust and her combat armor bearing fresh scorch marks. She had been Marcus's commanding officer since the first days of the invasion, and he had come to respect her tactical brilliance and unwavering determination to protect what remained of human civilization. Chun, we've got a situation that's way above our pay grade, she said, gesturing toward the structure's interior. Remember those intelligence reports about the Kethvar hierarchy? The ones that mentioned something about royal bloodlines? Marcus nodded. The alien invaders had a complex caste system, with different subspecies filling various military and civilian roles. At the top were the overlords, massive creatures that seemed to coordinate entire fleets with their thoughts alone. Below them were the warriors, the bulk of their fighting force, and beneath those were the workers who maintained their technology and structures. Well, it turns out we just captured something that's got the entire Kethvar fleet in an uproar, Rodriguez continued, leading him through a gap in the collapsed wall. 2 of their princesses, and somehow they're requesting safe passage to negotiate their release. The interior of the structure was a maze of twisted metal and pulsing organic matter. Bioluminescent panels flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows on the walls as they died one by one. The air smelled of ozone and something Marcus could only describe as alien fear, a sharp, metallic scent that made his teeth ache. They found the prisoners in what had once been a secure chamber, now partially collapsed but still intact enough to serve as a makeshift cell. 2 figures huddled in the corner, and Marcus felt his breath catch when he saw them. They were unlike any Kethvar he had encountered in battle. Where the warriors were massive, heavily armored creatures with razor-sharp claws and multiple limbs, these beings were smaller, more delicate. Their exoskeletons had an almost crystalline quality, reflecting light in prismatic patterns that hurt to look at directly. Most striking were their eyes, large, multifaceted organs that seemed to hold an intelligence that was both alien and eerily familiar. The taller of the 2 stepped forward, her movements graceful despite the obvious fear radiating from her body language. When she spoke, the words came through the universal translator that had been reverse-engineered from captured Kethvar technology. I am Zarathul of the 3rd Ascending House, daughter of Overlord Kethmoran, the Devourer of Worlds. This is my cousin, Lythandra of the 5th Ascending House. We claim protection under the old laws of war, even as they apply to your primitive species. The last words carried a hint of disdain, but Marcus noticed something else in her tone, uncertainty. These creatures, for all their technological superiority, were clearly out of their element. They had expected an easy conquest, not the bitter resistance humanity had mounted. Captain, Marcus said quietly, what exactly are you expecting me to do here? Rodriguez's expression was grim. High Command wants them moved to a secure facility for interrogation and potential prisoner exchange. Problem is, the Kethvar fleet has started broadcasting demands for their immediate release. They're threatening to glass every major population center on Earth if we don't comply within 72 hours. And we're not just handing them over because intel suggests these two might be the key to everything. Our xenobiologists think the royal bloodlines have some kind of genetic override for their technology. If we can figure out how it works. Marcus understood. In desperate times, even the smallest advantage could mean the difference between survival and extinction. But looking at the two aliens, seeing what might have been fear or desperation in their multifaceted eyes, he wondered if humanity was about to cross a line they couldn't come back from. Sir, with respect, I'm not a diplomat or a scientist. I build things, and lately I break them. Why me? Rodriguez handed him a datapad with his new orders. Because you're the only one in this sector with the combat experience to keep them alive and the engineering background to potentially understand their technology. Plus, Command wants someone who won't be swayed by politics or moral complications. Someone who'll do what needs to be done. Marcus read through the orders, his frown deepening with each line. He was to escort the prisoners to a research facility hidden deep in the Australian outback, protecting them from both rescue attempts and any human forces that might decide the aliens were too dangerous to keep alive. It was a journey that would take them through some of the most contested territory on the planet, past Kethvar patrol routes, and through areas where desperate human survivors might shoot first and ask questions later. There's something else, Rodriguez added, her voice dropping to a whisper. The younger one, Lythandra, she's been asking questions about human customs, specifically about protection and honor debts. Our translators think she might be trying to invoke some kind of diplomatic immunity, but the way she's phrasing it, it sounds almost like she's asking for sanctuary. Marcus looked at the two aliens again. Zarathul stood with regal bearing despite their circumstances, but Lythandra seemed smaller, more fragile. There was something in the way she held herself that reminded him of his younger sister back on Earth. If his sister was still alive after the bombardment of the Pacific Coast cities. When do we move out? 30 minutes. There's a transport waiting at Landing Zone Charlie. Your route will take you through the Broken Lands, then south through the no-man's zone between the Adelaide Hives and the Sydney Crater. Total travel time should be 18 hours if everything goes according to plan. Marcus almost laughed at that. Nothing had gone according to plan since the day the rifts opened and Earth sky filled with alien ships. But he had learned to adapt, to find hope in the smallest victories and strength in the bleakest moments. I'll need additional supplies, extra rations, medical kit rated for alien physiology, and redundant communication equipment. If we're going through contested territory, I want every advantage I can get. Already loaded on the transport. Chun. Rodriguez paused, something uncharacteristic flickering across her usually stoic features. Watch yourself out there. We're getting reports of strange activity from the Kethvar fleet. Something's got them spooked, and spooked aliens are unpredictable aliens. As they prepared to leave the ruined structure, Marcus noticed Lythandra watching him with what seemed like curious intensity. Through the translator, her voice came out soft and surprisingly melodic. Human warrior, what is your designation? Sergeant Chun. Marcus Chun. Marcus Chun, she repeated, the translator struggling with the pronunciation. I have observed your species during this conflict. You fight with honor, even when facing certain death. This is unusual among the species we have encountered in our expansion. Zarathul made a sharp sound that the translator interpreted as disapproval. Silence, cousin. Do not engage with the primitives beyond what is necessary. But Lythandra continued, ignoring her cousin's rebuke. Among my people, a warrior who shows protection to enemies in defeat earns great honor. Should we survive this journey, I will remember your name. Marcus Chun of the humans. Marcus felt an unexpected chill at her words. There was something in the way she spoke, a formality that suggested deeper meaning than simple conversation. But there was no time to ponder it further. Rodriguez was already signaling for the transport, and the clock was ticking on humanity's ultimatum. The transport was a modified cargo hauler, its civilian markings long since burned away by plasma fire, and its hull patched with whatever materials the mechanics could scavenge. It would take them low and fast across the Martian surface, hopefully avoiding the attention of any Kethvar patrols or automated defense systems. As they loaded the prisoners aboard, Marcus caught a glimpse of something that made him pause. Lythandra had pressed her hand against the damaged section of the ship's hull, and, for just a moment, he could have sworn he saw the metal respond to her touch, the scorch marks fading slightly, as if the damage was healing itself. "Did you see that?" he asked Rodriguez. "See what?" Marcus looked again, but Lythandra had moved away from the wall, and the damage appeared exactly as it had before. Perhaps it had been a trick of the light, or maybe the stress of the past months was finally getting to him. The transport's engines hummed to life with a sound like distant thunder, and Marcus strapped himself into the security station position between the passenger compartment and the cargo hold. From this position, he could monitor both the prisoners and the surrounding environment for threats. As they lifted off, he watched through the viewport as the battlefield fell away below them. The red dust of Mars swirled in their wake, covering the evidence of humanity's desperate stand against extinction. In a few hours, they would either be dead or one step closer to finding a way to end this war. But, as he glanced at Lythandra, who was staring out the opposite viewport with an expression he couldn't read, Marcus had the unsettling feeling that he was about to become part of something much larger and more complex than a simple prisoner transfer. The journey had begun, and, with it, a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about war, honor, and what it meant to be human in a universe that seemed determined to prove humanity's insignificance. Outside, the Martian landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, scarred by months of warfare, but still holding traces of the beauty that had first drawn humans to explore beyond their home world. Soon, they would leave even this familiar devastation behind, venturing into territories where the rules of engagement were written in languages humanity was only beginning to understand. Marcus checked his weapons one more time and settled in for what promised to be the longest 18 hours of his life. The transport shuddered violently as they crossed into the Broken Lands, aptly named for the twisted metal spires and crystalline formations that jutted from the earth like the bones of some massive buried creature. These structures were the remnants of the first HFY landing sites, where their initial terraforming attempts had gone horribly wrong, creating a landscape that was hostile to both human and alien life. Marcus felt his stomach lurch as the pilot, a grizzled veteran named Torres, threw the ship into a steep dive to avoid what looked like a patrol of HFY fighters on the horizon. The vessels moved in perfect formation, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that served as both communication and intimidation. "Contact in 30 seconds. Torres's voice crackled over the intercom. "Hang on, this is going to get rough." The transport dropped into a narrow canyon between two massive crystal formations, the walls so close that Marcus could see his own reflection multiplied infinitely in their faceted surfaces. The ship's hull scraped against something, sending a shower of sparks through the passenger compartment. Zarathul let out what the translator interpreted as a curse, but Lythandra remained eerily calm, her large eyes fixed on something beyond the viewport. As they flew deeper into the canyon, Marcus noticed that the crystal formations seemed to be responding to her presence, their internal glow brightening and shifting in color from deep purple to brilliant azure. "Torres, are you seeing this?" Marcus spoke into his comm unit, trying to keep the alarm out of his voice. "Seeing what?" "I'm a little busy, trying not to turn us into abstract art on these canyon walls." Marcus looked at Lythandra more carefully. She had placed both hands against the bulkhead, and he could definitely see the metal responding to her touch now. Stress fractures were disappearing, and the whole plating seemed to be strengthening itself. More disturbing, the ship's instruments were showing impossible readings. Power levels that should have been depleted were somehow being restored. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. Lythandra turned to face him, and for the first time since their capture, she seemed fully alert and focused. "Your vessel is damaged. I am assisting with repairs." "That's impossible. You're a prisoner, not a maintenance crew. Among my people, I am what you might call an engineer princess. My genetic template includes the ability to interface with technology on a molecular level. It is both a gift and a burden of my bloodline." Zarathul made another disapproving sound. "Cousin, you reveal too much to these primitives. Our captors do not deserve our assistance. Our captors are currently preventing us from becoming scattered atoms across this wasteland," Lythandra replied coolly. "Self-preservation is not betrayal, cousin. The transport suddenly lurched upward as Torres pulled them out of the canyon. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the Kethvar patrol ships still circling the area they had just left, apparently unaware of their passage. The crystal formations below continued to pulse with that strange azure light, creating a beacon that was visible even from their current altitude. "Well, that's new," Torres muttered over the comm. "Those crystals never lit up before. Command's going to want to know about this." Marcus was beginning to understand that their prisoners were far more valuable than anyone had initially realized. The ability to interface with technology at a molecular level would explain how the Kethvar had developed such advanced systems, and why their ships seemed to repair themselves during battle. "How many of your people can do what you just did?" he asked Lythandra. "Few. The engineer bloodline is rare, and those who possess it are usually kept safely within the core worlds. I was only on this expedition because—" She paused, exchanging a meaningful glance with Zarathal. "Because of circumstances beyond our control." The older princess finally spoke, her tone careful and measured. "There are political complexities within the Kethvar Empire that your species would not understand. Suffice it to say that our presence on this frontier world was not entirely voluntary." Marcus felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. These weren't just random prisoners of war. They were exiles, possibly even refugees. The implications were staggering. If there was internal strife within the Kethvar Empire, humanity might have allies they didn't even know about. The transport began its descent toward the first waypoint, a hidden refueling station built into what had once been a mining facility. The installation was completely automated, designed to service ships without any human contact that might compromise its location. As they approached, Marcus could see the subtle signs of camouflage. Rock formations that were too regular, vegetation that grew in patterns that looked natural but provided perfect cover for defensive systems. "Refueling stop," Torres announced. "We'll be here for about 20 minutes while the systems top off our tanks and run diagnostics. Stretch your legs if you want, but don't wander off. This place has automated defenses that don't distinguish between friend and foe if you get too far from the ship." As they landed, Marcus noticed Lythandra watching the facility with keen interest. Her multifaceted eyes seemed to be tracking things he couldn't see, and her head tilted in a way that reminded him of someone listening to distant music. "The defensive systems here are quite sophisticated for a primitive species," she said, apparently to herself. "Hybrid mechanical biological components, adaptive targeting protocols, self-maintaining power sources. How can you possibly know all that?" Marcus demanded. "I can hear them," she replied simply. "All technology has a voice, a frequency that speaks of its purpose and design. Your species has created something remarkable here, crude by our standards, but ingenious in its adaptation to limited resources." Zarathal looked uncomfortable with this conversation. "Lythandra, perhaps it would be wise to observe the human custom of remaining silent." "Why? We're already prisoners, cousin. What further harm can come from honest conversation?" Marcus stepped between them, his patience wearing thin. "What further harm? How about the fact that you're an advanced scout for an invasion force that's trying to wipe out my entire species? Excuse me if I'm not in the mood for friendly chit-chat about our ingenious adaptations." To his surprise, Lythandra's expression shifted to something that looked almost like remorse. "You misunderstand our situation, Marcus Chun. We did not come to your world as conquerors. We came as refugees, fleeing something far worse than your resistance." "What could be worse than genocide?" "Assimilation," Zarathal said quietly. "Complete absorption into a collective consciousness that strips away individual identity and free will. The Devourers have already consumed 12 systems in our home galaxy. We thought we could find sanctuary in this dimension, establish a new colony far from their reach." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his understanding of the entire conflict. "You're saying you were running away? From what?" "From something that makes our invasion of your world look like a minor territorial dispute," Lythandra replied. "The Devourers are not a species. They're a force of nature, a cosmic plague that turns every thinking being it encounters into an extension of its will. We hope to establish a foothold here, to build defenses, and perhaps find allies to help us fight back. Instead, we found a species that refused to simply submit," Zarathal continued. "Your resistance was unexpected. Most civilizations either surrender immediately when they see our technology, or they are quickly overwhelmed. But humans seem to possess a talent for impossible survival that confounds our strategists. The refueling process completed with a soft chime from the ship's systems. Torres emerged from the cockpit, stretching his back and looking around at the automated facility with the wary alertness of someone who had survived too many ambushes. "Everything checks out," he announced. "Fuel, life support, navigation systems all green. We should make the next waypoint before dark, assuming we don't run into any more patrol ships." As they prepared to depart, Marcus found himself looking at their prisoners with new eyes. If their story was true, then the war between humans and Kethvar was just a prelude to something far more dangerous. But could he trust them? Were they truly refugees, or was this just another layer of alien deception? The transport lifted off from the hidden facility, continuing south toward the no-man's zone. This was the most dangerous part of their journey, a stretch of territory where neither human nor Kethvar forces maintained permanent control. It was a wasteland of scorched earth and twisted metal, where automated weapon systems from both sides continued their mechanical warfare long after their creators had moved on to other battles. "Contact!" Torres shouted suddenly. Multiple bogies coming in from the east, moving fast. Through the viewport, Marcus could see them, sleek Kethvar interceptors diving down from the cloud cover like metallic birds of prey. Their hulls gleamed with the same bioluminescent patterns he had seen before, but these were brighter, more urgent. They were clearly searching for something. "They're not firing," Torres observed, his voice tense with confusion. "They're just following us." Lythandra moved to the viewport, pressing her face against the transparent steel. "They seek us," she said simply. "The rescue force my father promised. But they dare not attack while we remain aboard your vessel. The risk to our lives is too great." "Your father?" Marcus grabbed her arm, feeling the alien warmth of her skin through the fabric of her garment. "What aren't you telling me?" "Overlord Kethmoran is not merely a military leader," Zarathul explained, her voice heavy with implications. "He is one of the few remaining members of the High Council that opposes integration with the collective mind. His daughters are politically significant. We are not just princesses," Lythandra added softly. "We are symbols of the resistance movement within our own people. Our capture has given the war faction an excuse to abandon diplomacy and proceed with the complete subjugation of your world." Marcus felt the full weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. These weren't just prisoners. They were the key to everything. Their safe delivery to the research facility could provide humanity with invaluable intelligence and technology. But their death or mistreatment could trigger a genocidal response that would make the current invasion look like a police action. The Kethvar interceptors maintained their distance, matching the transport's course but not attempting to intercept. It was a tense aerial ballet, predator and prey circling each other while waiting for someone to make the first move. "How long before we reach the no-man's zone?" Marcus asked Torres. 15 minutes, assuming our escort doesn't decide to test their weapon systems. Once we're in the zone, things get complicated. Those automated defense grids don't care who you are. They'll shoot at anything that moves. Lythandra was still watching the interceptors, her expression unreadable. "There's something you should know about the zone," she said quietly. "The automated systems there have been modified by exposure to our technology. They have begun to evolve beyond their original programming." "Evolve how?" "They are becoming self-aware." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Self-aware weapons systems in a wasteland where no living being could safely travel. It sounded like the setup for humanity's final nightmare. But as the transport continued south, carrying its cargo of secrets and potential salvation, Marcus realized that nightmares were becoming a daily occurrence in this new reality. The only question was whether humanity would wake up from this one, or be consumed by it entirely. The horizon ahead was dark with smoke and electrical storms, marking the edge of the no-man's zone. Behind them, the Kethvar interceptors maintained their patient pursuit, waiting for an opportunity that Marcus was determined never to give them. In the passenger compartment, two alien princesses held the fate of two species in their delicate hands, while human warriors struggled to understand his role in a conflict that had just become infinitely more complex than anyone had imagined. The no-man's zone stretched before them like a vision of technological hell. What had once been fertile Australian countryside was now a hellscape of twisted metal and crackling energy, where automated defense systems continued their endless war against anything that moved. Burnt-out husks of vehicles from both sides littered the landscape, and in the distance, Marcus could see the towering shapes of what Lythandra had warned them about, machines that had evolved beyond their original programming. Jesus Christ, Torres muttered over the intercom. Those things weren't here last week. Through the viewport, Marcus watched as a massive spider-like construct moved across the wasteland, its multiple legs stepping carefully around the wreckage. The machine was clearly of human origin, but it had been modified with technology that looked disturbingly organic. Cables and conduits ran along its surface like veins, and its sensor arrays moved with an almost predatory awareness. The convergence is accelerating, Lythandra observed, her voice carrying a note of scientific fascination mixed with horror. Your machines are adapting HFY biotechnology, while our abandoned equipment is incorporating your mechanical efficiency. They are becoming something new, something that's shooting at us, Torres shouted as energy blasts began erupting around the transport. The modified spider machine had detected their presence and was now tracking them with weapons that fired beams of coherent plasma. Each shot came closer than the last, and Marcus could see other constructs beginning to converge on their position. Evasive maneuvers, Marcus ordered, though Torres was already throwing the ship into a series of wild turns and rolls that would have been impossible for any machine less agile than their modified transport. They're learning our flight pattern, Torres reported grimly. Each shot is getting more accurate. We need to set down and find cover. No, Lythandra said firmly. Landing in the zone means death. But perhaps. She moved to the ship's communication panel, her delicate fingers dancing over controls that should have been incompatible with her alien physiology. What are you doing? Marcus demanded, but she was already speaking into the transmitter in her own language, her voice taking on harmonics that the universal translator couldn't interpret. To Marcus's amazement, the attacking machines began to slow their pursuit. The spider construct stopped firing entirely, its sensor arrays tracking their ship but no longer targeting them. Other machines across the wasteland paused in their eternal patrol patterns, as if listening to something only they could hear. How did you do that? Torres asked, his voice filled with awe and suspicion. The evolved machines are not simply amalgamations of our technologies, Lythandra explained. They have developed a form of collective consciousness, but one that still recognizes certain authority protocols embedded in HFY biotechnology. I convinced them that we are not hostile. Zarathul looked shocked. Lythandra, such techniques are forbidden. The Council specifically prohibits communication with artificial collective entities. The Council is not here, cousin, and their prohibitions have led us to the edge of extinction. Lythandra's voice carried steel that Marcus hadn't heard before. Sometimes survival requires adaptation, even if that adaptation challenges our traditional beliefs. As they flew over the mechanical graveyard below, Marcus began to understand the true scope of what was happening. The war between humans and HFY wasn't just a conflict between two species. It was creating something entirely new. The merged technologies were evolving at an exponential rate, developing capabilities that neither side had originally possessed. Torres, how much further to the extraction point? He asked. Another hour if we maintain current speed and don't run into any more automated defenses. Problem is we're being shadowed by those HFY interceptors, and they're getting bolder. I think they're waiting for us to clear the zone before making their move. Marcus looked back at the pursuing alien ships. They maintained a respectful distance, but their formation had tightened, and he could see additional craft joining them from other vectors. Whatever force Overlord Kethmoran had dispatched to retrieve his daughters, it was substantial. How many ships does your father have at his disposal? He asked Zarathul. More than enough to reduce your research facility to atoms, she replied. But he will not act while we remain in your custody. The political implications would be severe. Explain. Lythandra answered instead. Our people are divided into factions regarding the response to the Devourer threat. My father leads those who believe cooperation with other species is necessary for survival. The war faction believes only conquest and assimilation will provide the resources needed to fight the Devourers. If we are killed while under human protection, it will be seen as evidence that cooperation is impossible, Zarathul continued. The war faction will use our deaths to justify complete genocide against your species. Marcus felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on him. Not just human lives, but the lives of countless Kethvar who apparently opposed their own government's aggressive policies. The transport carried more than just prisoners. It carried the future of two civilizations. "There's something else," Torres said over the intercom. "I'm picking up transmissions from the research facility. They're reporting unusual seismic activity in the area. Something big is moving underground." The terrain below them was changing as they flew south. The twisted metal and evolved machines of the no-man zone were giving way to red desert punctuated by massive rock formations. But even here, Marcus could see signs of alien influence, crystalline growths that pulsed with internal light, and patches of vegetation that moved with deliberate purpose despite the absence of wind. "The terraforming process," Lythandra observed. "Even our abandoned equipment continues to modify local ecosystems. Your world is becoming something hybrid, neither fully human nor fully Kethvar. Is that what happened to your other colonies?" Marcus asked. "No," Zarathul said quietly. "The other colonies were consumed by the Devourers before any meaningful terraforming could occur. This world may be the only place where such a hybrid ecosystem has had time to develop." The implications were staggering. Earth wasn't just another battlefield. It was becoming a unique environment that might hold the key to understanding how different forms of life could coexist and adapt. The research facility they were heading toward might discover far more than just alien technology. "Contact!" Torres's voice cut through Marcus's thoughts. "Multiple aircraft approaching from the south. They're not transmitting identification codes, and their engine signatures don't match anything in our database." Through the viewport, Marcus could see sleek aircraft rising from concealed positions among the rock formations. These ships were clearly of human design, but like everything else they had encountered, they showed signs of technological hybridization. Their hulls gleamed with the same organic patterns he had seen on evolved Kethvar equipment. "Those are not standard human military vessels," Lythandra noted, her voice carrying a note of concern. "The biotechnological integration appears to be quite advanced. Who could be operating hybrid ships like that?" Marcus wondered aloud. His answer came in the form of a transmission that crackled with interference and was barely comprehensible through the static. "Unidentified transport. This is the Free Terra Alliance. You are carrying high-value enemy assets through our territory without authorization. Prepare to be boarded." Free Terra Alliance? Marcus had never heard of any such organization. "Torres, who are these people?" "Rogue human faction," Torres replied grimly. "Intelligence briefings mentioned them, but said they were just scattered survivors. Looks like the briefings were wrong." The hybrid aircraft moved to surround them, their weapons systems clearly visible and tracking the transport. Marcus counted at least 8 vessels, each one showing the same disturbing blend of human engineering and alien biotechnology. "This is Sergeant Marcus Chun, authorized by Earth Defense Command for a classified mission. Stand down immediately." The response was immediate and hostile. "Earth Defense Command no longer has authority here, Sergeant. The old ways failed. We represent humanity's future, a future that doesn't include alien parasites." Marcus glanced at his passengers. Zarathul maintained her regal composure, but Lythandra looked genuinely frightened for the first time since their capture. The approaching ships weren't just threats. They represented a faction of humanity that had apparently embraced the same hybridization they claimed to oppose. "Torres, can we outrun them?" "Not in this bucket of bolts. They got us outnumbered and outgunned. Plus, we're still being shadowed by the Kethvar interceptors. If shooting starts, we'll be caught in a 3-way crossfire." "There may be another option," Lythandra said quietly. "The hybrid ships are using modified Kethvar biotechnology, but their integration appears incomplete. I might be able to interfere with their systems." "Absolutely not," Zarathul snapped. "You cannot use our technology to assist humans against other humans. The political implications will be irrelevant if we are all dead," Lythandra interrupted. "Marcus Chun, I can disrupt their control systems, but you must understand, doing so will create a debt of honor between us that cannot be easily dismissed." Marcus didn't have time to fully consider the implications. The Free Terra Alliance ships were closing in, their weapons beginning to glow with charging energy. In the distance, he could see the Kethvar interceptors also moving closer, apparently preparing for the expected battle. "Do it," he decided. Lythandra placed her hands against the transport's communication panel, and Immediately, Marcus felt the ship's systems respond in ways that should have been impossible. Power flowed through circuits that hadn't been designed for such energy levels, and the ship's basic transmitters suddenly began broadcasting on frequencies that existed beyond the normal electromagnetic spectrum. The effect on the Free Terra Alliance ships was immediate and dramatic. Their formation broke apart as pilots fought to regain control of vessels that suddenly seemed to have minds of their own. Energy weapons fired randomly into empty air, and several of the hybrid craft began spinning out of control. "What did you do to them?" Marcus asked in amazement. "I reminded their biotechnological components of their true nature," Lythandra replied, her voice strained by the effort. "The organic systems recognize my genetic authority and are rejecting their mechanical integration. But the effect will not last long, perhaps 10 minutes before they adapt." "That's enough time to clear the area," Torres said, already pushing the transport to maximum speed. "But we're going to have company when those ships recover. They'll be hunting us with everything they've got." As they raced across the desert landscape, Marcus watched the chaotic scene behind them through the rear viewport. The Free Terra Alliance ships were slowly regaining control, but the Kethvar interceptors were also reacting to the unexpected electromagnetic disturbance. Several of the alien craft had moved closer, apparently trying to understand what had just occurred. "Your actions may have unintended consequences," Zarathul warned. "The Kethvar military will want to understand how you were able to affect hybrid human technology with our biotechnological systems. They may interpret this as evidence of successful cooperation between our species." "Is that a bad thing?" Marcus asked. "It depends on which faction receives the information first," Lythandra replied. "If my father's allies learn of this, they will see it as proof that cooperation is possible. If the war faction discovers it, they will view it as confirmation that humans have stolen our technology and must be stopped before they become a threat to the Empire." The research facility was now visible on the horizon, a cluster of seemingly innocuous buildings nestled between two massive rock formations. But as they approached, Marcus could see that the installation was far larger than it appeared from a distance. Much of the facility was clearly built underground, with only essential surface structures visible to casual observation. "Final approach," Torres announced. "But we got problems. Seismic sensors are showing massive movement in the rock formations around the facility. Whatever's down there, it's big, and it's heading for the surface." Through the transport's enhanced sensors, Marcus could see deep beneath the desert floor. Something vast was moving through tunnels that stretched for kilometers in every direction. The scale was beyond anything he had imagined. This wasn't just a research facility, it was the center of a vast underground network that appeared to connect multiple installations across the continent. "The awakening has begun," Lythandra whispered, her multifaceted eyes reflecting a mixture of wonder and terror. "The hybrid ecosystem is becoming self-aware on a planetary scale." Marcus realized that they weren't just delivering prisoners to a research facility. They were arriving at the epicenter of Earth's transformation into something entirely new. The planet itself was evolving, incorporating technologies from both species to create a form of life that neither human nor Kethvar had ever imagined. As the transport began its descent toward the facility's landing pad, Marcus wondered if they were witnessing the birth of Earth's salvation or the beginning of its final transformation into something that could no longer be called home. The ground beneath them pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to acknowledge their arrival. And for the first time since the invasion began, Marcus felt that he was no longer just a soldier in a war between species. He was a participant in the birth of something that might transcend the very concept of species entirely. The research facility's landing pad descended into the Earth as soon as their transport touched down, revealing the true scope of the underground installation. Massive corridors stretched in every direction, their walls alive with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with something Marcus could feel, but not hear. The air itself seemed to vibrate with potential energy. Dr. Elena Vasquez emerged from the facility's depths, her lab coat pristine despite the chaos visible throughout the underground complex. Behind her came an escort of soldiers wearing armor that Marcus didn't recognize, sleek, organic-looking suits that seemed to respond to their movements with an almost liquid fluidity. "Sergeant Chun," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice carrying an urgency that made Marcus immediately alert. "We've been monitoring your approach. The prisoners you're carrying, they're more important than anyone realized." Marcus gestured toward Zarathal and Lythandra as they disembarked from the transport. They've already demonstrated abilities that weren't in the intelligence reports. The younger one can interface with technology on a molecular level. We know, and that's exactly why we needed them here. Dr. Vasquez led them through corridors that seemed to shift and adapt as they walked, the walls literally reshaping themselves to accommodate their passage. Sergeant, what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest levels. What we've discovered here changes everything we thought we knew about this war. They descended deeper into the facility, past laboratories where scientists worked alongside machines that were clearly hybrid constructions of human and Kethvar technology. But what struck Marcus most was the obvious cooperation he witnessed. Humans and machines working together as if they shared some form of communication beyond anything he had thought possible. "Doctor, what exactly is this place?" he asked. "This is Project Genesis," she replied. 6 months ago, we were just a xenobiology research station. But when the first Kethvar equipment began falling into our hands, we discovered something remarkable. Their biotechnology doesn't just interface with machines. It interfaces with living consciousness itself. They entered a vast chamber at the heart of the facility, and Marcus felt his breath catch. The walls were lined with what appeared to be massive organic computers, their surfaces covered in neural networks that pulsed with golden light. But what truly amazed him was the sight of human technicians working directly with these systems, their hands placed against neural interfaces that allowed them to communicate with the machines through thought alone. "How is this possible?" he asked. "The Kethvar biotechnology is based on consciousness networking," Dr. Vasquez explained. "It doesn't just process information, it processes thought, emotion, and intent." When we began studying captured equipment, we discovered that human consciousness is remarkably compatible with their systems. Lythandra moved toward one of the neural interfaces, her eyes wide with wonder. "This is far beyond what our own scientists achieved," she said softly. "You have created true symbiosis between organic consciousness and technological systems." "With help from your people," Dr. Vasquez admitted. "We've had Kethvar defectors working with us for weeks. Apparently, there are many among your species who oppose the current military action." Zarathal looked shocked. "Defectors? Members of the Empire working directly with humans." "Your cousin Deathmarin was the first to arrive," Dr. Vasquez said. "He claimed to represent a faction within your military that seeks an alliance against something called the Devourers." The two princesses exchanged glances filled with meaning that Marcus couldn't interpret. "Deathmarin is here?" Lythandra asked, her voice filled with hope and apprehension. "He's waiting in the primary research chamber. He's been working with our teams to develop defenses against the collective consciousness entities that apparently threaten both our species." As they continued through the facility, Marcus began to understand the true scope of what was happening. This wasn't just a research station, it was the birthplace of a new form of civilization, one that combined the best aspects of human determination and Kethvar biotechnology. They entered a chamber where a tall Kethvar in modified ceremonial armor was working alongside human scientists at a massive holographic display. The alien's movements were graceful and precise, and when he turned to greet them, Marcus could see intelligence and warmth in his multifaceted eyes. "Cousins," the alien said, his voice carrying harmonics of relief and joy. "I had hoped against hope that you had survived the destruction of the forward base." Lythandra moved forward to embrace him, a gesture that seemed natural despite the obvious physical differences between their species. "Deathmarin, when Father learns you are alive, he will be greatly relieved. We thought you had been lost when your ship disappeared. I was rescued by a human patrol after my vessel was destroyed by evolved machines in the no-man's zone," he replied. "These humans could have let me die, but instead they brought me here, to this place where miracles are being born daily." Dr. Vasquez gestured toward the holographic display, which showed a three-dimensional map of local space. "Deathmarin has been helping us understand the threat posed by the Devourers. According to his information, they're not just another hostile species. They're a form of technological virus that spreads from system to system, converting all encountered consciousness into extensions of a single collective mind." The display zoomed in to show the approach vectors of massive ships that dwarfed even the largest Kethvar vessels. Their design was fundamentally different from anything Marcus had seen, geometries that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in dimensions that human perception wasn't equipped to process. They will arrive in this system within 1 standard year, Deathmarin said grimly. Neither human technology nor traditional Kethvar biotechnology will be sufficient to resist them. But what we have created here, he gestured toward the hybrid systems surrounding them. This offers hope. Lythandra moved to one of the consciousness interfaces, placing her hands against the neural surface with obvious familiarity. Immediately, the chamber filled with new light as her awareness merged with the facility's central systems. Incredible, she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that the translator couldn't fully interpret. The consciousness network extends far beyond this facility. I can sense nodes throughout this continent, and connections reaching toward orbit. We've been building a planetary defense grid, Dr. Vasquez explained. But not just weapons, a consciousness network that can coordinate the thoughts and actions of millions of individuals across both species. The idea is to create a collective defense that maintains individual identity while achieving unprecedented coordination. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. You're creating the same thing you're trying to fight against. A collective consciousness. Not the same, Deathmarin corrected. The Devourers absorb consciousness, destroying individuality to create a single, controlling mind. What we are building preserves individual thought while allowing voluntary coordination. The difference is crucial. Through the facility's external sensors, Marcus could see that the surface above them was alive with activity. The Kethvar interceptors that had followed them were landing at designated sites around the facility, while human aircraft arrived from other directions. But instead of preparing for battle, he watched as crews from both species began working together to establish what looked like a joint command center. The revelation that our princesses were safe has convinced many Kethvar commanders to consider alternatives to military conquest, Dr. Vasquez explained. Your successful mission has provided the opening needed for meaningful negotiations. But not everyone is convinced, Zarathul warned. The war faction within our empire will view cooperation with humans as betrayal. And from what we observed during our journey here, some humans have formed factions that oppose any form of alien cooperation. The Free Terra Alliance, Marcus confirmed. They're using hybrid technology while claiming to oppose alien influence. The contradictions suggest their true motivations may be more complex than simple xenophobia. Through the consciousness network, information flowed faster than any conventional communication system could manage. Marcus found himself aware of developments across the entire continent. Human and Kethvar forces establishing joint positions, hybrid machines in the no-man's zone beginning to operate under coordinated control, and deep beneath the Earth's surface, vast biotechnological networks spreading through natural cave systems and ancient geological formations. The planet itself is becoming conscious, Lythandra observed, her awareness still merged with the facility systems. Not in the way the Devourers create consciousness, as a single controlling entity, but as a collaborative network of countless individual minds working together by choice. Over the following hours, Marcus watched as the facility transformed from a research station into the command center for humanity's greatest gamble. Representatives from both species worked together to coordinate defenses that spanned not just the Earth, but extended into the solar system itself. The asteroid belt became a network of hybrid sensor stations, while Mars served as a forward base where human engineering and Kethvar biotechnology combined to create weapons systems capable of challenging even the Devourer's advanced technology. But most importantly, the consciousness network allowed for coordination on a scale that neither species could have achieved alone. There will still be those who oppose this alliance, Deathmarin warned during a planning session. Both human and Kethvar extremists will see this cooperation as a betrayal of their species' purity. Let them, Marcus replied, surprising himself with his certainty. I've seen what we can accomplish together. I've watched human determination combine with Kethvar wisdom to create something neither species could achieve alone. As if summoned by his words, alerts began flowing through the consciousness network. The Free Terra Alliance had launched a coordinated attack on multiple cooperation sites, while Kethvar war faction ships were approaching Earth with obvious hostile intent. It appears the final test of our alliance has arrived, Zarathul observed calmly. The battle that followed was unlike anything in the history of warfare. Human and Kethvar forces fought side by side against extremists from both species, while the hybrid consciousness network allowed for coordination that seemed almost telepathic in its precision. Machines that had once been enemies worked together to defend installations where former adversaries had become allies. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, no longer just a soldier, but a bridge between species, helping to coordinate responses that drew on the strengths of both human intuition and Kethvar biotechnology. When the Free Terra Alliance's hybrid ships attempted to use their stolen technology against the facility, Lythandra's consciousness network turned their own systems against them with surgical precision. When Kethvar War faction forces tried to overwhelm Earth's defenses with their superior technology, human tactical creativity and adaptability found weaknesses that pure technological superiority couldn't address. But the true test came when long-range sensors detected the first Devourer Scout ships at the edge of the solar system. The massive vessels moved with purpose that transcended normal space travel, their alien geometries seeming to bend reality around them. "They're here," Death Marin announced grimly. "Earlier than projected, but our network is as ready as we can make it." The consciousness network that had grown to encompass Earth and its orbital installations suddenly expanded exponentially, reaching out to embrace every thinking being in the solar system. Human colonists on Mars, Kethvar refugees on the outer moons, even the artificial intelligences that maintain the asteroid mining stations, all became part of a vast collaborative consciousness dedicated to defending their adopted home. Marcus felt his individual awareness expand beyond anything he had thought possible, becoming part of a collective effort that maintained his individuality while connecting him to billions of other minds. Through this network, he experienced the determination of human survivors, the ancient wisdom of Kethvar refugees, and the pure logical clarity of artificial minds working in harmony. When the Devourer ships reached Earth's orbital defenses, they encountered something they had never faced before, a collective consciousness that was composed of willing participants rather than absorbed victims. The hybrid defense systems responded with creativity and coordination that transcended the limitations of any single species' technology. The battle raged across the solar system for days, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. The Devourer's greatest strength, their ability to absorb and control other consciousness, became their weakness when faced with minds that had learned to cooperate without surrendering their independence. In the aftermath, as the scattered remains of the Devourer fleet fled back toward their own dimension, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the research facility and watched as human and Kethvar ships worked together to repair the damage from the battle. Lythandra joined him at the window, her presence in the consciousness network now a familiar and comforting sensation. "Your species has taught mine something valuable, Marcus Chun. We thought strength came from unity of purpose. You have shown us that true strength comes from unity despite diversity. And your people have taught us that survival requires adaptation," he replied. "Neither of our species could have faced the Devourers alone. But together, we've created something that's stronger than both." Through the consciousness network, he could sense the vast changes taking place across the Earth. Hybrid cities were growing where human engineering and Kethvar biotechnology combined to create living spaces that adapted to their inhabitants' needs. The no-man's zone had become a testing ground for new forms of life that combined organic and mechanical elements in ways that transcended traditional definitions of both. Most importantly, the planetary consciousness network had become a model for other worlds. Reports were arriving from across the galaxy of species that had heard about Earth's successful resistance to the Devourers and were requesting assistance in creating their own cooperative defense networks. "We're not just saving our own worlds," Zarathul observed, joining them at the window. "We're creating a new form of civilization that could spread across the galaxy." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and the lightness of hope in equal measure. He had begun this mission as a simple soldier tasked with transporting prisoners. But he had become something far more important, a founding member of humanity's first truly interspecies alliance. The two alien princesses who had been entrusted to his care had become partners in creating a future that neither species could have imagined alone. And as the consciousness network continued to expand, reaching toward distant stars where other civilizations waited for the hope of cooperation in the face of cosmic threats, Marcus realized that the greatest victories were those that transformed enemies into allies and created strength through unity rather than conquest. In the end, humanity's greatest achievement wasn't the defeat of a superior enemy. It was the discovery that cooperation could create possibilities beyond the imagination of any single species, no matter how advanced or determined they might be.